Hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Christensen. This is Horror 101 with Dr. AC, and this is Scare-A-Thon 2023, benefiting the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project. We are over the halfway mark. We're in the back half of October, and there's absolutely plenty of time still to donate. The link to contribute to the fundraiser is below in the description for this video. And tonight we're going to be talking about The Innocents from 2021 out of Norway. And I'm going to bring in my awesome panel right now. And let's talk to Jon Kitley, S.A. Bradley, and Mark Easteadt. And we're going to be talking about The Innocents from 2021. Our writer-director is named Eskil Vogt, I think. But I'm very excited to chat about this one. This is not the 1961 classic starring Deborah Carr. So anybody who thought that's what we're going to talk about, we'll have another show later on. But welcome to the show, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I'll ask my usual question, which is, where did you come across this one for the first time, and what kind of drew you to want to discuss it tonight? Mark, let's go ahead and start with you.
Okay. I believe I'm in a monthly movie discussion group where we watch a movie and then come discuss it on Zoom once a month. And there's one person in there who's a fellow horror fan, and she recommended it. And so I went, and I have Shudder, and so I went and watched it and loved it. So when I saw your list for this month, I jumped at the chance.
I think it premiered on Shudder or on one of the streamings during that pandemic period where I was just trying to find anything and everything. And there was time, right? There was a ton of time to be able to watch. So I devoted myself going down the European side and the foreign side. And I saw just the poster of this, and I was intrigued to take a look at it. The great thing about streaming, for all the things you can say against it, is trailers. So I saw a very intriguing looking trailer out of it. And I said, yeah, this could be one that slid under the cracks because it's foreign. And yeah, that was a shocker when I saw it.
Yeah, it's set during a summertime, but it's a very chilly kind of movie, which kind of, fits in with its Norwegian roots. And John?
I think our mutual friend Ryan Olson had mentioned to me about it. He had seen it, so it put it up on my radar. And I don't remember at one point, but I was scrolling through Shudder, and there it was. So I sat down and watched it. And yeah, I knew nothing about this other than a recommendation. So I went into it completely blind.
Same here. I remember somebody asking if I'd seen The Innocents, and I said, "Oh yeah, of course I've seen The Innocents. I love that movie." And they're like, "No, it's a new one. It's about some kids." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." But that was really all I knew. And then when I was assembling the list for October, that one popped up. I said, great, this is an opportunity for me to, check that one out. But it was absolutely not what I was expecting. But it's set in a apartment complex in summertime, and most of the families have gone away on vacation. So there's just there's a new family that's moved in. Ida and Anna are the two kids. Ida is younger, and Anna is autistic. And so they are those are our kind of entryway characters. And then they strike up friendships with Benjamin and Aisha, who are the other two kids that are running around at the same complex. So yeah, that's our basic setup. But of course, what we find is that Ida, I think, kind of resents her sister for being autistic, which is that kind of, weird child logic where it's like, I'm frustrated by the fact that you're my older sister and you can't be an older sister to me.
And attention.
And absolutely. She gets a lot more attention than the younger one. But I thought this film speaks really well to that quality of childhood of being inarticulate, not being able to explain your feelings, the kind of casual cruelty that goes along with being a kid, the kind of learning to lie, where you realize there are things you probably shouldn't say to the parents, even though the parents say you can tell me anything. That's not always true.
I think because I went into this completely fresh and had no idea of what was going to happen, right in the very beginning, I'm like, what did I get myself into? Because Ida, at the first, the fact that she's pinching her sister who doesn't seem to react to it.
Right.
And then there's a whole thing with an animal, and you're like, so is this like a child serial killer thing
Mhm.
starting here? And it starts off somewhat really disturbing of this little girl, and what you don't know what the story is. So all I'm sitting there thinking is, this is going to be a twisted little film if she's some mini sociopath.
Yep.
Mhm.
But then it changes.
Yeah, it
She
does.
meets the real sociopaths, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know a lot of films say that they're from the child's viewpoint, but this was a film, it genuinely, the whole movie was from their viewpoint. You know, there's adults in the movie, but you kind of view the adults through the kids' experience. You realize and you look back at your own life and see how much it's true, but so much happens that your parents are unaware of.
Yep.
You hear so much, you see so much, and you do so much that your parents just don't know about. And a lot of it's meaningless, it doesn't matter, but you know, there's a lot of things that really form who you are and how you think that your parents just were not aware happened.
Yeah.
And
And-
you watch it really unfold really well here.
And you pointedly don't always tell your parents about the things you're doing because you want that to be your thing. You want that to be your
Mhm.
experience, and you don't want them taking it away from you or judging it or, somehow, sullying it for you. But in so doing, you also don't have them as allies, and you can't turn to them to say, so all this stuff is going on in my life and I can't catch you up on it.
There's the fact of if they're going to believe you anyway,
Right.
especially going forward with the stuff that starts to happen.
Right.
I mean, like you guys said, it's part of your personal experience and what you're going through. But then some of that stuff, you're like, nobody's going to believe this if I tell somebody.
I think what the movie did really well, and it's something that I say Stephen King does really well, but he doesn't get a lot of credit for. It's just in the background. Is that he's so good, and this movie's so good about showing people who are picked on when they get power. It really goes out of hand. That it is a learned thing, cruelty, and so it's like you forget that even when you're a kid, you had to discover being cruel. And then when you were cruel, you had this moment where there's a crossroads, and you see it in this movie. What I thought was so great was that they would do terrible things and they'd cry. And then it was almost like capillary refill. It was like at a certain point, oh, my empathy's, I'm done. That's enough empathy. I'm going to still be cruel. And the other one didn't, And so we start with, as Jon said, this pinching that's going on. There's not only inarticulate, it's so self-absorbed. The whole world is about you, right? And so not getting any attention, all this stuff. You see her doing terrible things like putting glass in the shoe of her autistic sister, but also stepping on a worm, which weirdly enough really bothered me. She's this thing that of all the creatures that are out there, you would think of the least of it being something that has emotions, but her stepping on it not once, but twice, just out of anger. I need to destroy something because I feel picked upon. And we see this again and again in the movie where everybody has a problem. Like Aisha has the pigmentation issue. You have a Pakistani boy who's surrounded by white boys that are picking on him. You have the autistic person who cannot get out of the vessel that they're in. And you have the girl who seems like she's just average and normal, but she's a little girl. Even in a household, she's the last in line, right? And so you see them all get picked on, and then you see the responses. And those responses are really intriguing. And I love that even the cruelest of the kids, who has maybe the biggest justification for being that way, still cries when he does the things. There's still that emotional thing of being an innocent, fine person someday. But then that capillary refill happens. And it's like, nope, I'm done. I don't have to be. I'm powerful. I can stop hearts if I want.
One of the things I remember seeing was Ida, our youngest child. She never smiles. And so when you see her smile for the first time, when she and Benjamin are in the woods together, and Benjamin pulls the trick, and you watch her face like light up, and I'm like, holy crap, look at you. Look at this happy little kid. And it's unfortunate that at least those first couple times we see her light up, they are around things that are a little darker. And you see her kind of being seduced by that darkness that Benjamin is cultivating.
Yeah, excited by it. She throws that big rock on an anthill.
Yeah.
And she's gleeful about that as she was about the bottle cap sliding through the air, which I thought was really cool. I love the subtlety of what they were doing with these powers.
And I love that. And this movie did for me, and I love it. It did a lot of showing and not a lot of telling. But the kids' performances were amazing, because if you didn't have good kids, you couldn't have done this, because it's so much is in their faces and their reactions. But like what I loved was, so you do see that big smile when he does that thing, but they kind of, they're kids, so they just kind of accept it. There's no question of like, where did this come from? Why is it happening? Because then the next thing she does is, well, look, I can hyperextend my elbows. Like, well, I have a trick too. It's just like, well, this is just a cool thing. It's just a part of life, and we kind of, now we're going to figure it out. But like, it's not like adults who would be like, now we have to study it and we need to figure it out. And why is this happening? It's just, okay, he can do this cool thing. I can too.
Yeah, I like that. I like that it is just taken for granted that this is how you are. And then we see these other kind of gifts. I mean, I think it's low hanging fruit to say, they're all kind of like X-Men in their way, in that they kind of, they all have their various superpowers. But what I really liked was how the various chemistries seem to work together. Like my powers amplified when I'm near you, and I can't do it with you, but I can do this. And I was like, that's something I haven't seen explored even in a superhero movie.
It's like just finding friends, right? I mean, the metaphor is
the chemistry.
You find the people. You're alone in this fucking place, and obviously they're not all making big bucks. This is a poor area. It's not dirt poor, but at the same point, everybody's living in boxes essentially, and they have nobody. And then they find each other, and it's like when you're a kid and you find your group that you can hang out with. It's like you are superheroes. You're running through the woods, making pretend pirate shows or whatever it was. I did things like that. We kind of broke into houses, so it was a little bit different, but
same idea.
Yeah.
I think the setting definitely worked. I'm sure it was on purpose, but I saw someone mention it feeling almost like a fairy tale setting. You have the deep dark green woods, and then you have the castles, but it also still, to me, felt very claustrophobic. Like you didn't leave that complex, and it's surrounded by woods, and so it's like the kid's world is kind of contained there. And I really like that. And it allowed for a lot of really close-up stuff and for a lot of really long distance shots that worked really well for communicating what needed to be communicated.
There's something about when a child is frustrated and they act out, but usually because they are smaller human beings, they can be physically or they can be stymied, they can be contained. And as we watch the powers start to grow, like they become scarier children, they become scarier human beings. And when the alliances start to get a little tenuous between them, that's also, you're like, watching, like the title is no mistake. Like we're watching things kind of drop away as to their innocence, and you kind of, watching her stomp on the worm and the whole business with the cat, you go, were these children ever innocent? When was that moment? Because I feel like we with everybody, they've already kind of crossed that line, with the exception maybe of Anna, our autistic individual, but everyone else has kind of like already kind of started playing around with either not telling the truth or doing violence or whatever.
I think that that's one of the things that's really amazing about this. Once again, the acting was brought up, and I was like,
Oh,
"Oh,
man,
Jesus Christ, this
it's
is like
so good.
400 blows acting." I mean, this
Yeah.
is like stuff that you should be remembered for, and also the writing and directing. It's not a traditional storyline in some ways because nothing's planned, right? It's very much like a kid's day. They didn't set out to hurt the cat, but they did hurt the cat.
Right.
And then when they did hurt the cat, you have this choice. Once again, it's the idea of how cruel can you be? You find your limit, you cry, you back up, and then one doesn't. And it's enough that she leaves when he kills the cat, when he steps on the cat's head, which is really hard for me to watch and made me happy in a way. It makes me remember what it's like for people who don't like horror movies to watch a horror movie, because it's really easy for me to say, it's just pretend and stuff like that. Why are you so upset? It takes an animal being tortured for me to kind of feel that in a movie. I can watch somebody get stabbed, and for some reason that doesn't do it. And I love that moment is she leaves, but then she comes back. How lonely do you have to be, right? And that's what I think is really interesting. They're stuck with each other in a way.
Yeah.
And I've been there. I've had friends where as a kid, you're kind of like, you're growing up in school, everybody is alphabetically, my bullies all had the C. I'm a Bradley. They were a C. They're the one right behind me, punched me in the back of the head. No surprises that for 4 years sitting behind me, I had this fucker. And I think there's something to that life as a child. You're kind of stuck and you have to make do with what's there. And so these are your friends. And he stomped on a cat's head. And can I accept that? And I thought that was something that in an adult film, you wouldn't get near. And so being able to tap into that child logic and that child understanding of what a life is like at that time was really fascinating. It made me feel a little bit flashbacky. I was having moments where I remembered things I wished I didn't remember that I did with my friends.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. That definitely that.
I almost think that it's almost the title is not necessarily innocence as like free from guilt, but just young. They're inexperienced. So
Naive.
they're naive. They're learning about life, and perfectly to Scott's point, when you're bullied at school and then all of a sudden you have a chance to become part of that clique, you're immediately going, okay, because you want to be part of that and you don't want to be on the other side. So when she runs away from the cat thing, which I found truly disturbing, even though I do not like cats, she goes back, like you said, because she doesn't want to be on the other side. She wants to be part of something. And whether it's good or bad, it's being part of a group, of being part of something. And that's when really bad things happen, because we've seen it when adults do that too.
Well, and the idea of that connection, because as they spend more time with each other and their powers start to become more apparent, they are truly unique. Like they aren't like other people. They are their own club. They can do things that they've never heard of anybody else doing. And I feel like that kind of bond, there's no place else to go. If you leave this group, you are truly alone. And that's why when the schisms start to happen within, where it's like that really kind of got on my, that's where I started to get a little anxious, because, we see Benjamin's proclivities toward cruelty, and that he is willing to go further and further than the others, because you've got one of your own now who is going down a path that perhaps the rest of you don't want to follow. And who's going to be strong enough to stand up to that person and say, because in any group, there is that pecking order, like there's an unspoken leader of who's going to be driving the bus, even for this moment, like for this game. I'm in charge. I set the rules. And then for this next game, somebody else will be doing it. But there is that sense of, and when we get we see who the rivals are going to be, it's kind of like, okay, like, how is this going to play out? And I love that we see that repeat itself a couple different times, where who's going to be vying for, top power.
Yeah.
And again, it's all shown. It's not told. Like, you have these confrontations, and you see Benjamin, you see the frustration on his face that like I'm not winning.
Yeah.
Why am I not winning?
Yeah.
And then like I need to back away and like reassess, but it's like it's all happening on their faces. They're not having a big discussion about it, as kids wouldn't.
Right.
They wouldn't really, they feel it. They wouldn't even know how to, again, articulate that I'm feeling like I'm being displaced as the person with the power here. It's just like, wait, I was the dude and now I'm not the dude, and it's all on their faces.
Yeah, well, that's the cool thing of how well this works. And I didn't think of it until we're talking about this, that she, oh my goodness, Ida is realizes that he's coming after them, that Benjamin is going to be coming after them, because, you know, without, better put the spoiler thing up. So you have so one of the characters that you think, oh, this is the power thing, right? As long as these two are together, you can hold that Benjamin to the side and something terribly tragic happens. She knows he's coming for them. She never tells the parents. And I completely accept that. I know that that's how it would work. I know that when I had a bully who was going to beat me up after school, I just lived in dread of having that fight, but I never told my parents. You just didn't rat. But it's not just that. You don't know how to tell your parents. What can you possibly tell them that's going to make this work? Kid logic says it doesn't matter what happens. He's going to get me. So, you know, I just have to run. The idea of running for the rest of your life makes logical sense when you're in like third grade. Well, I guess I can just run for the rest of my life from this guy, never face him. And so I felt that palpable when they were outside, and there's this thing that Benjamin can do where he can control people's minds, which interested me because you see people who maybe aren't completely well, you know, and so there's an incident where they're downstairs and they're trying to get back into the apartment building and they're dawdling. And of course, wonderful suspense. You see this guy booking down this bridge towards the family, and the autistic girl's taking too much time to get in. You're like going, fuck, I'm like counting the steps, knowing how fast that guy's going. Suddenly I'm a mathematician. I know he's coming right around. Axis Y is going to hit axis X. And they just closed the door in time. And the way that guy looked, just jamming at that door, trying to break it open, was absolutely terrifying. That was one of the scariest things I've seen since like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the 78 version, where there were those moments of a look in somebody's face. It was just absolutely terrifying. And it's so incidental and so small that the dad doesn't even get it. He's like, what's wrong with that prick? You know, that's what dad's thinking, but we know better.
Well, when talking about this, since we got the banner up, when we're talking about Benjamin being able to control people, he's also able to, you know, like have his telekinesis as well. And I thought it was fascinating. And again, this is never explained, but the fact that, you know, when he throws the frying pan and hits his mother, and then we go to Aisha's apartment and we see her vision of her mother bleeding from the forehead. And you're kind of like, whoa, wait, what just happened? Is this something that, is there a mirror experience occurring in that apartment? I thought that was really fascinating. That was something I didn't expect. And I love the fact that it never really does get explained.
None of it really gets explained as far as why things are happening or what's going on. Is it a location? Is it anything? None of that is explained other than weird things are going on. But it's also not, it's very unique in the powers where it's not superhero-ish, where you're going, oh, he's this and he's got this. It's very different. And I thought that was one of its charms too.
Yeah.
Well, when we see our autistic girls start to kind of break through that, you know, the bonds that are holding her trapped in her own body, when she starts being able to communicate in certain ways, first through her friend Aisha, and then later, like using her own mouth to verbalize things, you know, again, it's a superpower. Like she's breaking free of her bonds, and you're like, wow. I love, it's kind of the low key superhero stuff. I mean, yet there you have the flashier, you know, being able to throw objects around or inhabit somebody's mind. but then you have little things like that.
Yeah, I love the brilliance of how they did things like the pieces of dirt floating around their feet at certain points. And just, like the big moment in the film is two kids staring at each other across a lake. And
on a crowded playground.
Yeah, on a crowded playground, and nobody's noticing. Everybody's just kind of walking
kids,
by.
The babies are all crying though.
Oh, well, that's what's interesting. When the powers start happening, you have this thing which is somewhat reminiscent of another film that I just saw recently where evil attacks animals first and then kids. It was kind of like that for this movie, but it was the superpower that they would feel it. And I was like I started getting like leaning forward going, oh shit, where's this going to go? Are we going to have like babies with the bleeding eyes or something? I mean, the suspense was huge. And what I loved about it is it's absolutely quiet. And how often have you walked by in a public area where there's just a kid staring out into space? It's just a thing that happens with kids, the imagination. And here we're watching a life or death battle, and none the wiser. Nobody else knows. And I thought that was really amazing. It was, like you said, the low key parts of this are what I think makes the things that happen, like a broken femur, really painful. A pot of boiling water on legs, super painful. And once again, this is where there's no rhyme or reason. It's just like a kid, this movie. It's like, well, I killed my mom, and I'm just going to put a blanket on her and keep fans in the house so the stink doesn't get too bad. It's like, what the fuck is going on in this movie? It's like when I was a kid and I broke a precious thing in the house, I put a carpet over it.
just hide it.
Yeah, like that's gonna work.
You said, Scott, I think backstage that there were some other films that this reminded you of. The first one that came up for me was Chronicle, that kind of found footage one where it's the powers are brought on by an encounter from
big
from space, and but it's that same kind of thing where they keep it hidden and it's their thing, but then there's that kind of push pull as to who gets to decide what we get to do with these powers.
I saw movies like Mean Creek, which came out in like 2006, 2007, which is basically Deliverance, but with kids, without the major nastiness. But the idea that it showed a level of bullying from different sides, which I felt that this movie, there's like in Mean Creek, there's a bully, but in reality, he's just fucked up. And he's not really a bully. In the end of the movie, you find out that he was just misunderstood in some ways. He had problems and he's misunderstood. He certainly wasn't diabolical. And so there's no diabolical nature in this movie either. And there's something about that, not quite Lord of the Flies thing, but that idea that the inner cruelty that can come out, and something where you have superpowers means it leaves a bigger mark. There were black eyes that I got, but not broken femurs or just
or stopped hearts or things like that.
Stopped hearts, yeah. Holy shit.
And Mark, you commented that there's some little bit of connections between the 1961 Innocence and this film, in that we've got the kids.
Something else I liked is that a lot of times you hear it's a slow burn. And to me, 95% of the times that means the movie just has bad pacing. It's not a slow burn. It's a not greatly made movie that had some really good moments. Where this one was a genuine slow burn that fairly early on, almost from when she pinches her sister, like you feel uneasy the rest of the movie. Yeah. And it really does not let up. You feel either unease or genuinely disturbed, and then back to unease, like all the way through until that conclusion that if you're hearing us talk about it and haven't seen, you're going to think it's like this final battle that is so big, and it's not. And what made it so amazing is that it isn't, or it was, but no one could observe it, including us. I remember the first time I watched it, I was like, I've not ever seen a scene like that in a movie ever. And that's part of what I've loved about, coming back to it again the second, I watched it again recently. It's the same as like, that was just so amazingly, the idea of it was so great, but then they executed it so perfectly. Like you said, just that little bit of sand moving, like, something's happening, the little ripples in the water. The one question I did have during that epic battle, you see a lot of kids come out on their balconies around the complex. And then when it's over, they all just walk away. So my thought was like, obviously they sensed it somewhat like the animals and the babies did. But like, was it they just sensed it and they came out to see what was happening? Or there was almost an implication, and then someone I know who watched it said they thought like, do all the kids in this complex have powers? And were all of them helping her to defeat him by like adding to their power like they did earlier, where they influenced each other's level of power? But I don't know. There's no indication one way or the other. It was just curious. Like they all came out, so they knew something was happening.
That's the way I took it.
It was over. Like, did they leave? Because like, okay, he's done, so we don't have to worry anymore, or like, show's over. I didn't know which it was.
Huh.
That's the way I took it. Again, they don't show their hand completely, but I kind of feel that it's when Ben kills the kid, the bully on the bridge. If I'm remembering this correctly, it's been a while since I've seen it, but it's kind of like he's crossed the line. So during that final battle, all the rest of the kids come out and join forces to take care of this one that has gone too far. And the minute that's taken care of, they just turn around and go back to, because they're at least maybe older and have control of what they're doing, or they know the difference between right and wrong, where these the group that we're following are in the beginning stages. And I think we see Ben, because he had been bullied, he goes to the immediate one side that he has power, so he's drunk with power. Whereas in Ida, we're not sure in the beginning, but then maybe she learns at one point. But Ben is too far gone because he had been bullied so much. He's got the rage and the anger, so he doesn't care. And the rest of the kids went, okay, we have to stop this or help stop this before it gets too far. That's the way I took it as.
Wow, cool. I didn't see that at all. So that's kind of interesting.
I thought it was just the two, just the small group, an internal civil war. But I think that's fascinating that, because I mean, I did remember them all coming to the windows, and I picked up on that as like the energy drawing them to it.
That's how I saw it.
But almost not knowing why.
Yeah, because you don't see anybody standing there on the playground or anywhere near. It's just in the windows.
Just in the complex.
Yeah. And so I wasn't sure what that, I was worried. I didn't know what the fuck was going to happen, quite honestly. I was like, are kids going to start raining from the sky? I had no clue. I was like, are they killing all the kids around them? I thought all bets are off with this fucking movie. But I thought it was really great, Mark, what you had to say about, I think early on you had mentioned that this movie did the idea of kids very well, where you just don't talk to the parents and you don't tell anybody anything, that you have this end, which is so quiet, this violent battle between these two entities, but nobody even knows. It's like a whisper. In fact, our monster, if you want to call him a monster, dies without a noise.
Yep.
He just, the only thing that we get is, I think, a stroller falls over and all the
kid on his bike,
crying.
I think, gets knocked over.
Yeah. Kid gets knocked over, but he just slumps forward, and it takes another kid coming up and just looking for a little bit and feeling that something's wrong to know that he died. And I thought that was really cool, down to the idea of how there's just a whole universe with kids that nobody ever knows about. Yeah.
It's kind of like the Avenger movies before the CGI guys get a hold of it. They just all go
right.
And then cut. Okay, had all this stuff. So that whole battle took place. What if they would have had another $100-200 million? We would have seen all of that.
That's right. Glowing eyes.
Exactly. So instead, we just get.
Yep. I wrote down it's the lowest. I wrote down it's the lowest key boss battle you've ever seen.
Yeah.
But to me, it was like so much more effective. Than a big bombastic. I mean, a big bombastic one, it would have gone against everything that the movie was about. But
it's so much more effective than I love Scanners. And then there's the oh my goodness, what is his name? Joe. It's the low budget guy from did VFW, but before that, Joe Bagos, where he did Scanners-ish film.
Yeah.
And it's
The
so
Mind
much fun.
Inside, I think.
Yeah, the mind inside, where it's so much fun, but it's so overdone of close-ups of people going, you know, and you're just like, Jesus, somebody is going to burst a vessel just acting in this fucking movie. And I love that instead you have this very, very subtle thing, which works so much better if you set everything else up. And the thing is, everything else has to set up perfectly for that to work. So the mood has to be that all the way through, that I would sit there and be on the edge of my seat, reminiscent of like that guy walking really quick into the apartment building after the family. Reminded me of the alligator in X. Was it X? Yeah. With where you're watching her swimming and you just see this alligator. It was the same kind of thing, where understanding where the audience is in the story, you know, being the audience yourself while you're making the movie and realizing this is the beat that we have to hit, I think is rare. And so I was really impressed that this movie was as low key as it was, yet had truly horrible things happening in it. I mean, the mom getting destroyed, it was just absolutely horrifying. And even the idea that she can't just push him off the side of the bridge. She can't push Benjamin without an adult seeing her first. and she has to, like, well, I'm committed, and she pushes him anyway. And I'm like, oh my God, you know.
Yeah, I was thinking, how desperate did she feel? Like, like usually the adult comes and that's the end of it. Like, okay, an adult's here.
She walks
they're
away
going to
from
take care of it, or like it's over. But like, she knows the adult isn't going to believe her, isn't going to do anything. So like, even though she's watching me, I'm still doing it because I don't see any other way out.
Right.
You know, and sadly it doesn't work for her.
What's your master plan? I'll buy him a plane, a model plane.
Distract
He'll be
him.
Distracted, and I'll push him over the side. Wow. I mean, that's just, you have to live in the kid world. And I think that was really impressive. Reminded me of Night of the Hunter in that fairy tale kind of way. You know, Night of the Hunter is much more abstract, but there's that
kid's
feeling.
Perspective again.
Yeah,
too,
the kid's perspective.
Just a little trivia. The woman who plays Ida's mother is her mother.
And
when you get it, you could see they very much look like each other. And apparently she's been in other movies that with this director, either as an act, like he either directed or was the writer of the movies. So he's worked with her before.
Well, and on that note, I mean, like the woman who the kid who plays Anna is incredible. Like I was like, well, you know, they clearly have somebody who's autistic, and I'm like, well, I don't think you can get that kind of performance out of somebody. You know, I was really knocked out. It was such a phenomenal cast, like all the way across the board. So, well, thank you all so much. I'm really glad we got to sit down and chat about this one. Again, this is Scare-A-Thon 2023, benefiting the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project. The link to donate is below in the description. Please make a contribution. And until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.